Alright, so we are here for the first of the presidential review guide sheets that we will be completing in our AP class, just to kind of give us a summation of the different presidents and what they focused on during the administrations and kind of the effects of their administrations and what were going on. So obviously, when we're going to be starting with George Washington. He's the first one. We have up here with the political parties, we usually keep track of that. With George Washington, he's not going to have a political party, even though I would also put up here probably, let's do that now, Federalist leaning, right? He was kind of a Federalist, but he didn't officially have a political party. His vice president is going to be John Adams. Remember that John Adams was not chosen by Washington to be his vice president through the electoral clerk at the time. The person who came in second became president. So John Adams it is. But Washington's got a tough situation when he comes into the presidency. One, we've kind of got a pretty high war debt, or economic footing has to be established. We're starting to see a fracture between the North and the South over economic concerns, somewhat social concerns with slavery, but a lot of the issues with slavery in the North do not focus on abolition just yet. Even though the North is abolishing slavery, they are not pushing this idea that slavery needs to be eliminated from the country completely. Their kind of focus during the Constitutional Convention was to kind of make sure the southern plantations didn't overrun politically by using slaves as citizens when it came to giving out votes, but then keeping them from being able to vote. Basically, if the South was able to do that and count slaves as full citizens, they would dominate in the House. Couldn't dominate in the Senate, could dominate in the House, but those people weren't franchised, so it was given Southerners, Southern citizens, the white men that could vote, it was going to give them more political power than what they would have if they were a Northern Yankee. So there is a North-South slavery debate, but again, it's more political in nature, not social just yet. Economic issues we've already mentioned. The North is starting to turn more towards industrialization from their merchant class, their merchant and professional classes. Now they're starting to push towards more textile mills, grist mills, that type of idea. And the South is more focused on plantation slavery. Excuse me. The middle states are still on that grain crop kick, and we'll talk about that North-South and how the South, even though it's agrarian, agricultural, it is not providing its own food, which is going to be a big problem for them later. All right, possible war between Britain and France is going to be the major issue of Washington's foreign policy. Having to chart that course between a big old rock over here and a hydro over on the other side, or a tempest, storm. Where do we go between those? How are we charting that course? Both of Washington's elections are unanimous, so we don't have to worry about that. 88 or 89 and 92, both unanimous, and it's kind of already imagined that it would be so. So let's focus on his domestic policy. When we're taking, because this is our first one, when we're taking a look at presidents, we'll focus on two things. Domestic policy, which is anything internally within the country, debates, issues, usually focusing on economic and social issues within the country. And then for foreign policy, that's going to be foreign countries. We'll also add natives in as foreign policy right now, because that's how the government is seeing them and responding to them, as foreign nations. You can't have a treaty with a state. Treaties are with foreign nations. All right, so with that domestic policy, a lot of that domestic policy is going to be dominated not by Washington himself, but by Hamilton. So he's with that cabinet, right? And we know that Washington has his cabinet. Edmund Randolph is the Attorney General, Henry Knox, Department of War, Jefferson as your Secretary of State, and Hamilton as your Secretary of the Treasury. There's going to be tension there. A lot of it is going to be that Jefferson versus Hamilton toe-stepping on foreign policy issues, where Hamilton's kind of giving his advice on an issue that Jefferson feels is his own. Jefferson is also going to kind of step on Hamilton's toes when he's resisting Hamilton's economic plan. But Hamilton's economic plan is the basis. The tariff, and this is not a protective tariff just yet. True, Hamilton wants to protect emerging American industries, but his chief concern is to get more tax money into the government so that it can pay down the debt, prove to other countries that we can be trusted with their cash, so that they'll lend us more and we'll be able to jumpstart our economy and our government's creation as far as the buildings, the Navy, things that we need money for, that we'll be able to spend it now rather than having to wait 20 years later to have enough tax money to build a ship. Governments and businesses don't work on the premise that you only spend the money that you have. Business loans are pretty much the way things get done. Startups, with mom and pop shops, with multi-million-dollar businesses, they are not spending within their means. They are spending with other means. They're taking loans, but they can manage those loans. They're in good shape. This is what we're trying to do as well. All right, the whiskey tax is another way to try to get more income to then be able to afford more loans and get more power, more centralization of the economy, and that's what's happening with the whiskey tax. We're going to have blowback with the Whiskey Rebellion you see down there. 12,000 soldiers have to be sent out to crush the farmers in western Pennsylvania from balking at paying a tax on whiskey. The National Bank, this would be another thing, is going to be able to control inflation and help the economy chart an incline, positive growth, but to make sure it's a controlled growth and not just out of control, bust and boom issue. And the assumption of state debts, which belies everything. Taking over state debts to increase the federal debt, prove that we can pay it off, gain the respect of other countries, they'll lend us more money. Building that credit score. All right, Washington, D.C. is going to be approved to help get Hamilton's economic policy through Congress. Southerners had already paid their war debt. They didn't want to assume these debts of the North. That was what they were going to get as the carrot. All right, we've already mentioned the Whiskey Rebellion. The other big domestic policy issue, which really isn't a deal at the time, it's going to be a big deal later in 1800 when Marbury versus Madison has to be brought up. But the Judiciary Act of 1789, it sets up lower courts, but it's also going to give the Supreme Court the power to issue writs of mandamus, or forcing other government officials to do something. That's the key part of the Judiciary Act of 1789. And then within Washington's farewell address, he's going to warn against political parties. Again, they're forming right underneath his nose. Don't really want to use the term naive for Washington, but he may be a little bit too idealistic to believe that he could resist political parties from being formed. All right, foreign policy. We got the French Revolution. So with the French Revolution occurring based off a lot of American ideals, that is going to throw Europe into an entire tizzy. Going against the divine right of kings and ending up beheading your king and a whole lot of other people, leading to anarchy and the emergence of a dictator. That is not something that people want to encourage. Britain and a lot of other powers in Europe were going to move very swiftly to try to hem in the French Revolution to prevent the ideas from spreading. This is a very radical concept at the time, and they want to make sure that it doesn't continue. So Britain and France are going to go to war. Both sides are going to start to violate American neutrality. Citizen Genet is going to be dispatched to America to talk to Washington. He's a diplomat. However, he doesn't land directly in Philadelphia. He's going to go down to the South, and he's going to make these passionate speeches trying to get Americans to volunteer or to help out the French Revolution and to help out against Britain. Washington sees this as an issue that could divide the nation, and he is going to basically tell Genet to stop it. He's going to try to push for him to go back to France, but Genet is going to plead with him not to deport him, mainly because he feels that if he goes back to France, he will be executed. So he will be allowed to stay in America, but he cannot continue to rile up the Americans. And I always mention that this is like the Chihuahua situation. We're kind of small, we're kind of yappy, not really powerful. We may have a stinging bite, but it's not something that's, unless there's a pack of Chihuahuas, really going to challenge Spain or France or Britain. So we're dealing with this Chihuahua situation. We want to kind of put our ideas out there, try to make sure people are respecting us, but without a lot of power, that's going to be hard. And then we're going to have the proclamation of neutrality. The Northwest War for the Ohio River Valley. It's ours. We claim it. We got it from the British. However, it doesn't mean other people don't also claim it. And this, we're not talking about states. They've given up those claims since the Northwest Ordinance. It's going to be the natives that I'm talking about. And the Miami tribes specifically are going to fight against Americans moving in. There's this idea that the British are handing out guns to the natives. They are for fur trading, but they're going to be used and sometimes encouraged to attack American settlers in the region to destabilize us. In the end, we're going to dispatch Mad Anthony Wayne. They're going to fight a few battles, but the biggest one's going to be the Battle of Fallen Timbers. The natives run away trying to get into British forts to have them protect them. They don't. And so left with no other option, the Miami Indians are going to give up claims to Ohio. And this is going to stimulate our American settlement there. More people are going to move into the Ohio River Valley because they see it as safe now. They don't have to worry about being killed in the middle of the night. And they will start settling in large numbers. This is not the end of the tension in the Ohio River Valley because other tribes are there and the Miami Indians just gave away their land. But it does allow for more Americans to move. Jay's Treaty in 1794, that's going to be a big thing as far as just trading. They were impressing our sailors, they were seizing our vessels because they were in this war against France. We want to prevent that from occurring. We want to make sure that doesn't happen in the future. So Jay is dispatched, and even though he does not get that done, he does get them to agree to withdraw from the Northwest Territory, and he's going to get very favorable trade deals with Britain. A lot of this is because Hamilton had written to the British ministers and said, hey, this is what we're going to be pushing for. If you just hold out, this is what we'll agree to. So it gave us excellent trade conditions, but it still didn't get us our ships back. It was damages for seized ships, but they didn't promise to never do it again. They didn't respect our neutrality. However, other countries are taking a look at this and they're seeing us getting closer with Britain, and they need to peel us away from Britain and back towards them. France in particular, but also Spain. So when we're trying to get to use New Orleans as a port, something that we had lost when Britain had basically agreed to give that territory to, or to give more. Well, Spain always had that territory, but Britain had said we would share the Mississippi River. We need to get New Orleans as the port. That's the key thing for the Mississippi River. We need to be able to use it. So we're going to get the right to deposit in New Orleans and a slight adjustment of the border for the Spanish in West Florida. But really why Spain comes to the negotiating table on this issue mainly is because they want to try to bring us back away from the British. They still have some issues with Gibraltar, and they also are a little bit concerned about Britain's supremacy on the sea, challenging them in Latin America. And then Washington's farewell address, when he's leaving office, he's also going to warn us against permanent alliances. Not all alliances, but permanent alliances. Alright, so this is what we've got. This is how it's going to go with your other ones, and I want to give you this example so that you can complete the Adams one yourself. We'll bring that in. Well, I'll also do a video for Adams, but I kind of want to see it to focus a little bit more on this style than the ones that you gave me the other day. Alright?